Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. This is going to be review number 15 or so involving this brewery here on the channel, if memory serves me correctly, and they've really made a name for themselves when it comes to the New England Hazy IPAs. In fact, I don't think they've released a beer that is not a New England Hazy IPA yet, so yeah, kind of interesting, but definitely one of the Swedish breweries that I would recommend that you check out. They've built that reputation and they deserve it, in my experience, I would say. So for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Nora to the north of Örebro, which is out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Apex Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called the Power Posing Double IPA. It's a New England Hazy IPA, as I kind of inferred earlier, but it comes in at 8% ABV, which is the usual strength for one of these Apex Brewing Company double IPAs. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for February of 2021. It was released a few months previously through Glassbanken.se. So Glassbanken are, they're a good service and you get very quick delivery. They've got a good selection of stuff, but they are pretty expensive in my experience. So for example, if you bought this beer a few months ago through Glassbanken.se, then you would pay somewhere in the region of 90 Swedish kroners for it, whereas if you buy it through Systembolaget, it's going to cost you 50 or 55 Swedish kroners, so nearly double the price actually. So yeah, it's up to you whether you want to drink these beers as soon as they're released, or if you want to wait for the second batch to come out a little bit later through Systembolaget. So I prefer to kind of do the latter. I like kind of doing the Lokal Småskalig releases. But yeah, go and check out Glassbanken.se. Like I say, good service with good selection, but yeah, it is a little bit pricey. You will be paying Danish prices plus postage to get these beers here in Sweden. But yeah, Apex Brewing Company release all of their new stuff through there quite early, so you can check that out. And this beer, I think, is the first one they've released through Systembolaget in maybe about 6 months or so, come to think of it. I think the last release they did through Systembolaget was actually in like August or so of 2020. So hopefully we see more kind of regular releases through Systembolaget from Apex, and hopefully they've kind of expanded their brewery up, because I think it was kind of due to capacity that they weren't really releasing stuff through Systembolaget for a little while. But yeah, definitely one of the Swedish breweries that are worth checking out, particularly if you're interested in the New England Hazy IPAs. These guys are producing stuff that is as good as the likes of Stigbergets, OO Brewing, Brewski, and then you've also got 10 Hands as well, who are another kind of newer brewery on the scene that are doing some really nice stuff too. So Apex Brewing Company, I recommend for people who like the New England Hazy IPAs. But yeah, looking forward to this one, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So anyway, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Apex Brewing Company before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, or whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Apex Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So Apex Brewing Company, as I've told you already, are based in a little place called Nora to the north of Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm, and they were founded back in 2017 by Daniel Gatchis and Niklas Lundgren. So both of these guys are musicians, with Niklas having played in the band 59 Times the Pain, while Daniel played in The Voice of a Generation, and these two are responsible for the brewing operations of the company, but there are a few others involved there as well, and this is Leif Carlson, Ola Eriksson, and Roger Hjelm. So they started off with a small brew kit of 500 litres with 6 fermentation tanks, and they were just selling their beers in the local area before they got them into Systembolaget and then distributed nationwide. So in 2018 they brewed around 35,000 litres of beer per year, and that's expanded over the years. And I think that was actually when I first encountered this brewery. I was recommended this brewery, and I think the first beer I reviewed was called Single Hop, if I remember rightly, and I was really impressed with that, and I've kind of followed what this brewery have been doing ever since. So yeah, my first review from these guys was about 2 and a bit years ago now, which is strange to think. But over the course of 2018, I think they released around 25 different varieties, all of them New England IPAs, and in 2019 they produced around 120,000 litres of beers per year. But they've continued to expand the brewery, from what I understand. They've invested in new tanks and stuff like this, and as of February 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced 60 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number of course is continuing to rise, and they are rebrewing some of the old stuff as well, and yeah, it is pretty much all New England hazy IPAs that these guys are producing. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about the brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, pretty cool, I have to say, pretty cool. So yeah, I do hope that at some point in the future we can see like a black IPA and a West Coast IPA from these guys. I think that would be quite interesting. But you know, maybe they just want to stick with the New England IPAs. You never know. I would like to see a few different styles from these guys, but we'll just kind of see what they do. I think I messaged them and asked them at one stage, I think not long after I first discovered them, if they were going to do a West Coast IPA, and they did say that they were open to the idea, but I haven't seen anything from them on that front yet. But a West Coast IPA from these guys, a proper, you know, big 80 IBU, sweet and oily West Coast IPA, I think would be a really interesting proposition from Apex Brewing. But in the meantime, they've got these lovely New Englands that we can have a look at. But yeah, as I say, that's all about the brewery. To tell you a little bit about this beer itself then, so as I mentioned to you, this one is an 8% New England double IPA. It's hopped with Columbus, Citra, Victoria's Secret and Brew One, with a malt base of Maris Otter extra pale malts, naked and torrefied oats and torrefied wheat, and a bit of maltodextrin as well. And this one uses WLP 66 London Fog yeast. So out of the hops in this one, we are familiar with pretty much all of these. You know, Columbus is known as a big kind of bittering hop from the States. I think that's about 12% alpha acid. It gives you quite a distinctive kind of spicy character. Citra, we know, lots of lovely mango notes, lots of little tropical fruit complexities as well, 13 to 14% alpha acid. Victoria's Secret comes from Australia. That's about 12% alpha acid, if I remember rightly. Soft passion fruit, mangoes and things like that from that. And then Brew One is a hop that I've had a few times, but you don't come across that all that often. So Brew One, I think Brew One is American, but I remember it's about 14% alpha acid, and it's quite pineapple-y, but it's got a few other kind of tropical complexities to it as well, if I remember rightly. So not a hop you come across all that often, but I have seen a few beers with that in it over the last little while. But yeah, that's your little info on the hops. But as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty similar to what we've seen from Apex Brewing Company before. As you can see, 8% New England double IPA, and they always put on the back here, music, people and beer. But yeah, this is the kind of theme of Apex Brewing Company. They've always got this kind of animal Illuminati type thing there, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it says on the site here, created and produced by Apex Brewing Company in Nora, Sweden, all rights reserved. So yeah, pretty cool, I have to say. So all of the beers have a kind of similar style of artwork, just a different colour usually and a different animal on the can. But 440ml can, as I said, I paid either 50 or 55 Swedish kroners for this one. Let's assume 55. So €5.50, that's about £5 British, and in the States that would be about $6 American, something like that, just to give you a bit of a price reference. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us then. Yeah. There we are. You can smell the fruit on this already. This is going to be another lovely beer. Yeah. So we've got maybe about 3/4 of it in the glass there, and we'll stick the rest of it in a little bit later on. But yeah, as you can see, this beer has poured a very, very nice bright yellow colour. I would say it's a lovely kind of mango juice colour actually. I mean, I really like how this one goes together. You've got a solid 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head on this one. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty damn nice. For an 8% New England, it's not the kind of soupiest and gloopiest of New Englands that you're going to come across. But remember, when it comes to the level of haze in these beers, it's dependent on a couple of things: the wheat content, the oak content, and the yeast, I guess you could say as well. But I remember the Apex beers. I do remember the Apex beers not being the soupiest and gloopiest, but having a good level of haze. And you can see that this one, this one does certainly have that. But yeah, lovely kind of bright yellow mango juice colour. I do like how that kind of goes together. And remember, the colour of these beers is dependent on, 1, the type of malts you use, and 2, the length of the wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour out of the beer, but it's dependent in the first instance on the exact type of malts that you're using. But yeah, in terms of a New England hazy IPA of any of any strength, if you like, there's nothing really surprising about the appearance of this beer. It looks exactly kind of as you'd expect. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Very curious about this beer for sure. Yeah, so this is quite interesting. Now, straight away with this beer, and I found that this is something you often get with these WLP yeasts, you get this sort of almost grainy, woody, farmhousey sort of thing coming out of the beer. So yeah, I really like how that one goes together in a sense. You always get this aroma out of these Apex beers, but then when you actually taste them, you don't get so much of that kind of flavour, if you like. I've always wondered that. This is one of the things that makes me think I need to take one of these beer Cicerone courses and just get the full kind of chemical terminology for all of this. Would be quite interesting with my chemistry background and stuff too. But yeah, straight away with this beer, you're going to smell a bit of that kind of farmhousey, crackery, woody, yeasty sort of thing there. That's the thing that's forming the kind of linchpin of the beer for me. Otherwise, if you take the aroma in a bit more deeply, you do get a nice little bit of a white bready character out of it. There's a nice kind of bitey, wheaty character to this beer as well. And then you've also got a nice little bit of how would you say, you do get a little bit of the smoother oaty notes out of the beer. But for me, in terms of, there's a few different directions you can take New Englands in. They can be farmhousey and kind of yeasty, they can be sort of rye and more grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, more kind of barley malt leaning and white bready, and then you also get the more kind of brown sugary ones as well. This one, in the aroma, it comes across as being sort of yeasty and farmhousey, but it's also got a good bit of wheaty and bitey character there. Often these beers can kind of exhibit a few different characteristics. They can fit into a few different categories, if you like. So in the aroma, this one gives the impression that it's going to be more farmhousey and yeasty, and it's also got a good little bit of wheaty bitiness to it, whereas the white bready notes and the oaty characters are noticeable, but they're not quite as prominent as the other things we've mentioned. So yeah, it's really interesting how it is quite interesting how that side of it goes together. Actually, it's a really, the aroma in these Apex beers is really quite unusual in that sense, because that doesn't really normally translate into the flavour, I would say. But yeah, I think we've as I say, you've got that farmhousey, yeasty, and slightly woody kind of thing sitting underneath. You do get a bit of oaty smoothness out of it. There's not really a brown sugary element to this one, maybe just a little hint of like a Werther's Original or something like that, but that's very, very minimal. And then at the back of the nose, it's all about the kind of wheaty bitiness to the beer, absolutely. But on the hoppy side of things then, and this is where our focus should be with these New Englands, for me, the green component of the beer, there's a teeny little bit of earthiness to this one, but again, that really takes a back seat. But you've got a lovely big kind of floral aromatic quality to the beer. It's got a big floral kind of green component to it, this one, for me. So I really like how this goes together. It's got a nice big kind of floral aromatic sort of spicy thing to it. That's the Columbus coming out of this one. This beer does actually smell like it might be a bit more bitter than some of the other ones that I've come across from Apex before. But like I say, it's been a wee while since I've had something from these guys, so don't hold me to that. But yeah, you do have quite a little bit of nice kind of grassy quality to this one as well. It comes across as a wee bit zesty in that sense as well. So yeah, it's interesting from that perspective too. So the green component for me does have a wee bit of pungency to it, a wee bit of bite, and that's never a bad thing. That is never a bad thing. So yeah, I certainly like how this beer presents itself from that perspective as well. So yeah, in terms of the kind of the fruity side of things, then I think we've covered the green component as much as we need to. It's just quite zesty and grassy, and then a bit kind of green, sort of floral and spicy as well. But yeah, you've got some really nice kind of fruity characters to this one, and if you know these hops, it is kind of what you'd expect. This is a very tropical leaning New England IPA for me. So lovely big kind of soft mango notes, both from the Victoria's Secret and from the Citra. Of course, you've got a few other things in there. For me, there is a wee bit of a slightly peachy sharpness to this one, and I think that's Victoria's Secret that's going to give you that. But then you start to get a really juicy kind of pineapple note. You really get that pineapple quality from the Brew 1 coming out in this beer, which is, it's really nice. So for me, yeah, juicy mangoes in the background, quite a wee bit of peach kind of sharpness there, and that builds a good bridge between the wheaty bitiness that the beer has and the fruity side of the beer. So I like that about it, but you can smell a few other fruity notes under there. You know, there's a bit of papaya, apricot, all of these kind of things. So I think in summary, it's a really kind of tropical, fruit leaning New England IPA, this one, but it smells very, very nice, I have to say. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it, because you're always guaranteed an interesting beer from Apex Brewing Company. So yeah, interesting to see the Brew 1 kind of showing itself off a little bit more in this one. But yeah, let's have a go at this beer then and see how we get on. This one is the Power Posing Double IPA, coming in at 8% ABV from Apex Brewing Company in Nora, near Örebro here in Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. That's pretty nice, actually. That is pretty nice. You know, one of the things I always say, and this beer's got a really nice and quite sweet aftertaste, actually, come to think of it. That's interesting too. One of the things that I always say about these Apex beers, people ask me, you know, what's your favourite beer that you've had from Apex? I actually find it really hard to decide, because, you know, a lot of the, you know, the IPAs, the thing is, you're always guaranteed a good IPA from these guys. But a lot, you know, the fact that they only do one style, it's difficult to remember. And I suppose the other thing is, you know, the number of beers that I've been reviewing over the last little while, just with all the stockpiles and things that have built up. You know, it's kind of like that as well. I do struggle to remember what my favourite beers are from Apex, but as I say, you are guaranteed a nice IPA from them, and this one really goes down a treat, actually. This is very, very nicely done, so thumbs up to them once again. And the thing with these is, as well, they're stupidly easy to drink. This one, my first impression of this one is that it feels like one of the slightly more kind of crisp and slick ones that I've had, and it does feel as if it's a wee bit sweeter as well, and it's interesting considering the malt base in this one. You know, they've used Maris Otter quite often before, and quite a number of their beers have the likes of Golden Promise in them as well, but this one really has a nice wee bit of sweetness on the aftertaste. You will notice that this beer's got just a little bit of a kind of more oily sweetness to it, in that the latter, in the back half of the beer. So I really like how this one goes together. So yeah, it's nice. It is nice how that, yeah. I think it's just been a wee while since I've had one of their beers, as I say. I was really impressed with the muck that I had from that they did with Beerbibliothek, and that one was a lot thicker than this. This one, as I say, a bit slicker and a bit more kind of crisp. So yeah, that's my kind of initial impressions of the beer, but let's break down the flavour a little bit more then. Let's break it down. So yeah, so like I say, straight away with this beer, you'll find that this one, the malt base actually comes across as being quite kind of crisp in a lot of ways. So you can feel a little bit of a, this beer almost feels as if it's got a wee bit of a kind of Pilsnery malt kind of thing going on with it. It's got a real just crisp edge to it for me. But yeah, you can feel a little bit of a soft kind of white bready quality just going right across the kind of middle of your palate there. As you go down the kind of middle line of your tongue, it just feels really quite crisp, actually, and as you reach that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, there's a wee touch of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing there. And as you go into the back third of your palate, that's where the wheat really kind of comes out. The beer feels distinctly thicker in that back third of the palate there, so you can feel the wheaty bitiness and a slight kind of grainy, crackery type quality on the back third of your palate there. So yeah, thicker at the back, and as you come further forward, again, thickness drops away in that border region, then you've got a real kind of white bready, almost crisp white bready note in there, a bit of a kind of Pilsnery type crispness, and then in the centre of your palate, you've got some really nice, kind of brown sugary and kind of oily qualities coming out of this beer. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of, as I say, you've got that kind of, how would you say, the sweetness in this beer I think builds, as I say, the further you go into the aftertaste. So in the middle of your palate, you've got a wee bit of that kind of Werther's Original, oily kind of thing. You really get that out of the beer, but as you move further out from that, it gets distinctly more kind of biscuity and more like McVitie's Digestive like, if that makes sense. You get a wee bit more of that. So in the very centre of your palate, it's a wee bit kind of Werther's Original butter candy like, and then it just gets gradually more kind of biscuity and McVitie's Digestive like the further out you go from that. At the front of that, the front half of that middle third of your palate, you do get a wee bit more of an oaty smoothness out of the beer, but otherwise there's not too much in the way of you know, there's not too much in the way of there's not too much in the way of oatiness in this one and creaminess. This really strikes me, as I say, as more of a kind of slick and crisp double IPA. It's stupidly easy to drink, to be quite honest with you, to put it that way, but it's a very, very nice beer. Absolutely very nice. It's definitely up there with the standards that the Apex have kind of set themselves. But in terms of the hoppy side of things, then I think we've said all we really need to about the malt base of this beer. It's quite interesting for sure. But in the back corners of the palate, there is a wee bit of earthiness there. That would be the Columbus, I would suspect, that's giving you that. Most likely, pardon me, the Columbus is being used as the bittering hop in this beer, and the Citra, the Brew One, and the Victoria's Secret, those will be being used as later addition hops. Remember, the bitterness of a beer depends on how much hop you put on early on, and then over the course of the wort boil, you've got the trade-off between bitterness in the gradual trade-off that moves in favour of flavour and aroma, actually. So yeah, you'll get that out of this beer for sure. So as you move further forward from the back corners of the palate, you get a little bit of a kind of floral kind of spiciness coming out of the beer. So I do appreciate how that kind of goes together in this one. I like that about this beer. So yeah, the floral side of things is quite nice in this beer for sure. But then yeah, around the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and grassy. It does have a wee bit of zestiness there as well, which is nice. Which I do suspect that's the Brew One side of the beer as well. I think that's what's giving you the wee bit of zestiness in there. But yeah, other than that, I think yeah, the green component, it develops a big floral aromaticity. It gives you a wee bit of grassy zestiness. But I don't get so much of the spiciness out of the Columbus that you might normally get. But then again, it's a New England, it's not a West Coast, so you have to bear that in mind. So yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of the beer then. Front third of your palate, as I always say, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So on that border region between the front third and middle third of your palate, there's a wee bit of a kind of bready quality coming out of it. You do get a wee bit more of a bread crusty note, and underneath that there is a wee bit of a smooth, like sort of soft, almost very slightly wheaty, white bready kind of thing, and the fruits just sit on top of that. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a wee bit of a kind of concentrated citrusy kind of thing coming out of it. So I do appreciate that about this beer for sure. So at the back of that front third of your palate, they've got a more concentrated kind of passion fruity note out of the beer. As you move further forward, the passion fruit kind of lingers there a little bit, and you do get a wee bit of a kind of peachy sharpness actually coming out of it too, which is interesting. As you reach the kind of middle of the front third, I would say you're getting more kind of soft mangoey notes, but then the kind of citrusy side of the beer comes out a little bit more. It's almost quite lemony on the kind of front edge of the palate. I think if I was tasting this blind, I would probably guess that there was a bit of Centennial in this or something, but then again, it's the peach. I think it definitely has a good bit of a peachy flavour to it, this one, that's driving the kind of sharpness of the beer in a lot of ways, but the passion fruit has quite a bit of pungency too. So yeah, in a lot of ways this beer, it's quite soft and quite subtle, but then the fruity side of this beer is really quite zesty actually. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It does It's got a nice bit of juiciness as well. And as I say, the things that come out of this beer further into the aftertaste, it's the sweetness from the Maris Otter. The Maris Otter's got that lovely butter candy, Werther's Original, you know, and slightly McVitie's digestive biscuity thing going on, and then the fruits have a really nice juiciness, but then the zestiness builds again the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer. So this one's quite interesting. This strikes me as being a little bit different from the other Apex ones that I've had before, but like I say, I've had so many IPAs from these guys, it's different, you know, it's quite difficult rather to remember the little nuances from beer to beer. So yeah, that's the one thing I would say. But these Apex ones, you're always guaranteed a good IPA with these guys, but to try and remember which one's your favourite is a real task with Apex. But yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me, this one. I do like this one, and I would say, you know, I don't know if I would have kind of legitimate grounds to say, but this one's probably within one, just in terms of how the beer strikes me, if you like. This is definitely one that I've really enjoyed. It's maybe one of my ones that I would consider as being most enjoyable from Apex. I would go that far with this. I would say this is maybe one of my more favourite ones that I've had from them, if that makes sense. But yeah, the best beer I've had involved in this brewery, I think, was the one that they did with Bibliothek, the muck. That was really good. So I hope that both breweries get together again, pardon me, and do some collaborating. But yeah, this is very nice. Quite a citrusy, zesty IPA. And if that's your sort of thing, you will enjoy this for sure. But let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So for me, I find this beer right in the middle of the spectrum. I find it straight up mid-bodied. The carbonation has a wee bit of crispness to it, but otherwise it's very smooth. And I find this beer to be really kind of quite slick in a lot of ways, to be honest with you. So yeah, for me, this is one of the slicker Apex brewing companies, and there's one part of my brain wants to say, yeah, this is a lot of the Apex beers are kind of like slick and kind of stupidly drinkable in the way that this one is, but there's also part of me that remembers I've had one or two that I remember being a bit thicker than this, so I'm a bit torn on exactly what to say about this beer. But in terms of the hoppy bitterness, I think this is a fairly standard, you know, 30 IBUs. Normally with a double IPA, I would maybe want a wee touch more bitterness to it, like 40 or something. I always think, for me, there's the kind of 10 IBU rule. If it's a single New England, it should be about 30. If it's double, 40. If it's a triple, 50. You know, you should jump up in about 10s. I do think this beer is kind of... I mean, it's got the nice big kind of floral and zesty components to compensate for it, but maybe a wee touch more bitterness to this one could be good. But remember, this is my weakest point of beer reviewing, is detecting the IBUs, because I'll say this is like 30 and it'll be about 50 or something like that. That's just kind of how it goes. So I find this one, it's got a real, to me, this one comes across as just more zesty. And but in fairness, if this is 30 IBUs, I think that could work for it. But it doesn't strike me as overly bitter. But maybe I've kind of killed my mouth recently with the West Coasters in terms of bitterness. So that's another thing to consider. But anyway, it does have a wee bit of bitterness to it. But overall, I find this beer, it's the floral qualities and the zestiness that strike me a bit more. The malt base, like I said, it feels quite light. It almost feels, if I was blind tasting it, I would think it's got a bit of Pilsner malt in it, because it feels like a really crisp malt base. It's got a bit of wheaty bite and things like that as well. Then you've got a really nice kind of citrusy, but still quite juicy, fruity character to this one. So this has been a really interesting IPA to review. I have really enjoyed filming this review for you, and it's nice to see Apex releasing through Systembolaget again. So I hope that they do that more regularly during this year, because it seemed to be that in 2020 they released a couple of beers like from about February time until August, and then just in August it suddenly stopped. So I'm hoping that there's you know, a beer a month, or you know, a couple of beers every 2 months or something like that. I'm hoping that Apex put their beers through Systembolaget a little bit more regularly over the course of this year. But yeah, as I said earlier, this has been a very nice beer to review, quite a citrusy leaning IPA for me, and this is one that I would definitely recommend you check out should you get the chance. This brewery are very well respected, with good reason in my experience. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the Power Posing Double IPA from Apex Brewing Company in Nora near Örebro. out to the west of Stockholm here in Sweden. A very nice brewery, this one. I've really enjoyed this beer, so thank you for watching. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Apex Brewing Company. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future, but in the meantime, make sure you have some nice beers and try a couple from Apex Brewing Company if you can. They're, you know, very well respected within this New England hazy category. Slàinte, Scott, cheers, and catch you guys in the next review.